Hey, it's Luke from LT Gaming, and today we're talking about X4 Foundations and where it fits with all the other major space sims. X4 is a game I keep coming back to and I want a proper space sandbox, but I've also been playing a lot of the other space games this year. This is a really important video to get your feedback on, and I want to know what you think about the comparisons I made and the state of X4 this year. Let's make it a really knowledgeable and fun comment section. I can't wait to read them. So before we jump in, if you enjoy space games, space sims, and games that make you say, I'll just do one more trade run, before somehow losing an entire evening, give the video a quick like. It helps the channel massively, and it tells the algorithm that deep space logistics are somehow entertainment. The reason I wanted to come back to X4 now is the Empire update, because this feels like Egosoft leaning into what makes X4 really special. This isn't just a small quality of life patch or a bit of extra content around the edges. The 9.00 update is looking at a whole host of changes. There's tweaks to the combat, strategy layer, fleet control, which I think is really important, the map, which some people do complain about, though I've never had a real problem with, and even how parts of the resource system function. And for a game like X4, these are not small things, because every tiny change can ripple through the whole simulation, so they've got to get it right. But what has me most interested is that this update seems to focus on making the Empire layer feel better to actually play. And that's really the unique selling point of X4, so I get why they want to focus on it. Little things like priority orders, which are actually big things, are exactly the kind of feature X4 needs. Because with this game, once you expand beyond one ship, the challenge is no longer just can I fly this thing, it becomes about managing a whole empire of ships and basically stopping your brain from melting. But I remember back in the olden days when I was playing X3 and I had this massive fleet, and then I found they just flew into a station one time and were never seen again. So yeah, there's a tale of woe from the olden days of gaming. I want all your X and X2 stories in the comments now to show you're older than me. But once you add in more dynamic combat, better capital ship behavior, improved turret accuracy, much better variety in ship loadouts, plus UI and map improvements, the game really starts to feel better. And then those little extras like the ship showroom module, they are absolutely great for immersive gamers like me. The update really starts to feel like it's for the long-term X4 player, and we can praise Egosoft for that. It's the person who doesn't just want a space game but wants a space empire they can actually live inside. It's my total dream game. And then of course there's Star Wars Interworlds, which is one of those mods that almost feels unfair to casually call a mod. It really is Star Wars brought into X4's engine and creates a proper Star Wars space sim sandbox like we haven't had from a modern game. You take X4's trading, fighting, station building, faction conflict, and empire management and basically land it in the Star Wars universe. You've got fractured Imperial remnants, the New Republic, bounty hunters, pirates, corporate factions, and classic Star Wars ships. And it doesn't just feel like a skin, it feels like a complete total conversion. I cannot give this mod enough love, and if you want to play it currently, it doesn't play nicely with the new Empire beta patch. You need to throw back to 8.00 and just have an amazing time. I know the team is working on a new update, but there is so much to do and things that were changed with the new patch, so it's going to take some time, but we will feature it as soon as it's ready. Now, starting with No Man's Sky, this is probably the comparison where X4 looks the most intimidating from the outside. No Man's Sky is just so easy to jump into right now. You can load it up, you land on a strange planet, you scan some weird creature that looks like a depressed space pineapple, and within minutes you're off exploring, building, upgrading, or just vibing across the universe. It's colourful, immediate, approachable, and honestly, for a lot of people, that's exactly what they want from a space game. X4 is a completely different beast in that regard. It's slower, harsher, and far less welcoming at the start, but where No Man's Sky gives you that beautiful feeling of discovery, X4 gives you something else, the feeling of building power. You're not just visiting the universe, you're investing in it. You're building stations, managing fleets, affecting economies, and eventually watching your own empire become part of the galaxy's machinery. So I'm gonna say No Man's Sky is the better space adventure for relaxed exploration, but X4 is the better game if your fantasy is less what's over the hill and more how do I control the entire supply chain behind the war. Plus, aesthetically, I just think X4 is more of a space simmers thing. Elite Dangerous is probably the cleaner spaceflight comparison, because if what you want is to feel like a pilot, Elite still does that incredibly well. The cockpit immersion, the sound design, the feeling of docking, traveling, mining, fighting, and physically handling your ship, that stuff is still excellent. Elite is for the spaceflight aficionado. It's for the player who wants the ship itself to matter, who wants the journey to feel tactile, and who gets genuine satisfaction from lining up a clean approach to a station. station. But I'll be honest, Elite has often felt to me like a game that does not always respect your time. There's a lot of travel, a lot of grind, and sometimes a lot of waiting for the good stuff to happen. I once spent 3 weeks traveling out to the unknown parts of space, and the payoff just didn't feel that big once I returned. X4 is clunky in different ways, but the difference is that your time tends to convert into structure. A trade run can become a mining operation can become a station, and then a station can become a whole fleet. And then that fleet can basically cause a load of trouble and start a war economy. Elite is better at making you feel like a pilot in a massive galaxy, I think no doubt about that, but X4 is better at making you feel like you're building something that keeps running even when you're not personally holding the flight stick. Then we have Starfield. Okay, this is probably going to be rough, but it's interesting because I don't really see it as a direct space sim competitor. It's a Bethesda RPG set in space. Let's be kind and say that its strengths are questing, factions, character builds, loot and locations, and you also have that familiar loop of wandering into a place, picking up 14 sandwiches and somehow leaving with a legendary rifle. If you want structured story content, dialogue choices, hand-built quests and a more traditional RPG format, X4 is not trying to beat Starfield at that. But the reason I made this comparison is because both games are chasing a version of the space fantasy. While Starfield gives you authored stories in a space setting, X4 gives you systems that create stories on their own. In Starfield, the memorable moment might be a questline or a faction decision, but in X4 it might be the time your poorly defended station got dragged into a conflict because your supply chain was feeding the wrong faction, or the time you built your first capital ship and realized you weren't just surviving anymore. Being kind to Starfield is probably the stronger RPG, but X4 is stronger as a living space simulation. Now, Evochron Legacy SE is one I really wanted to include because I've been playing a lot of it recently and people in the Discord keep telling me to stop talking about it, but especially with the Star Trek mods, it really scratches a very different itch. Evochron has that brilliant old school space sim freedom to it, and it's made by one guy, and I just like that. It feels like a game where you can just exist out there. You're not always being pulled through a modern progression system. You're just a pilot in a ship in a hostile universe doing your own thing. And with Star Trek style mods, music, sounds, ships and interiors, it suddenly becomes this surprising, immersive, fan-made Star Trek space sim experience. Compared with X4, Evochron is much smaller in presentation, but it has a charm that X4 doesn't quite have. It also runs on almost anything, even a potato, which matters because X4 can be demanding and performance is definitely an issue once the universe gets busy. X4 clearly wins on economy, fleets, empire building and visual scale, and also the long-term strategic progression. But Evochron wins on that feeling of direct pilot freedom, accessibility on lower-end machines, and the simple joy of being out there in space without needing a spreadsheet open in your soul.
Just a quick interlude to say most of you who watch the channel are not subscribed. So make sure to go down below and hit that subscribe button because it helps smaller channels like us grow really quickly, and both me and Tom really appreciate it.
Avorion might actually be one of X4's closest indie cousins, at least in terms of the broad fantasy. It's a procedural co-op space sandbox where you can build ships out of scalable blocks, then do all the usual exploring, mining, trading and fighting, and also build an empire importantly. So on paper there's a lot of overlap here: ships, fleets, industry, combat progression, and the idea that you start small and slowly become a major force in the galaxy. The difference for me is aesthetic and atmosphere. Avorion is clever, flexible and mechanically interesting, especially if you love designing your own ships, but X4 has a stronger sense of place. Its ships feel more grounded in a believable universe, its stations feel more connected to a larger economy, and its factions feel more like they belong to a living world. Avorion may be the better creative shipbuilding sandbox, but X4 is a stronger space empire fantasy, especially if you care about immersion, faction identity, and that feeling that the galaxy is doing things even when you're not looking. Helium Rain is a fun one because it's free, which I mean we always love. It's genuinely underrated, and it's very clearly operating in some of the same mental territory as X4. It puts you in charge of a spacefaring company, and a simulated economy emerges as a result of your actions. It even has Newtonian flight and a smaller, more focused planetary system built around sectors, trade and corporate expansion. The obvious difference is scale. Helium Rain feels like a compact, stripped back, almost classic version of this fantasy. It doesn't have the sheer sprawl, faction complexity, visual spectacle or long-term empire depth of X4, but that can also make it easier to appreciate in some ways. It's smaller, cleaner and less overwhelming, and also look, it's free guys. On the other hand, X4 is the bigger, messier, more ambitious game, and it's definitely not free, but I do do like to point people towards Helium Rain. I think it's definitely worth trying, especially because it costs you nothing and it understands the appeal of running a space company. This has got me wanting to play Helium Rain again. I'm interested. If you've played it, let me know in the comments. I really would like to know. Now, EVE Online is a comparison I need to be slightly careful with because I haven't personally lived in EVE in the way some players have, like Tom. He was hugely into it back in the day. But from the outside and from everything EVE represents, this might be the most useful comparison for explaining X4. EVE is of course a legendary player-driven space economy game, and X4 in a very loose sense is like a single-player echo of that fantasy. It does not have EVE's human drama, player politics, massive alliances, or terrifying spreadsheet warfare, but it does give you that idea of industry, logistics, faction conflicts, ship production, trade routes, and economic power, without asking you to join a corporation, learn 40 acronyms, and trust strangers with your digital life. For me, the single-player experience is always where it's at. EVE is of course the deeper social and economic universe, but X4 is the better choice if you want some of that industrial space empire feeling, but in a single-player sandbox where the galaxy is dangerous, but at least nobody is trying to scam you in a chat window. Oh dear, here we go. Star Citizen is the dream game comparison. On paper, it's trying to be everything: first-person immersion, ship interiors, space flight, planetary landings, trading, combat, social spaces, FPS missions. I mean, the scope is absolutely huge. And all in a shared universe where you're not just flying a ship, you're physically living inside the world. And to be fair, when Star Citizen works, it can look incredible. It just doesn't work most of the time. There are moments lately with new patches where the scale, the detail, and the sense of presence are genuinely impressive, however. But the problem is the same one that it's had for years. It still feels unfinished no matter how confidently the marketing talks around it. And the business model is frankly atrocious. I mean, we live in a free world where you can spend the money on what you like, but if you're spending $5,000 on a ship, I honestly think you should probably just enjoy something else. I just don't see the value in that. And I am a space sim fanatic, and even I think that's a bit silly. But there is an individual in our Discord who spent thousands on this and he doesn't regret it. So I mean, fair play to it. If that's what you enjoy and you want to spend your money on that, I guess you have to be open to it. X4 is definitely less cinematic and it doesn't have the same first-person immersion, though they are improving that. But it is a game with complete loops. You can build, trade, fight, command, expand, lose money, recover, and build again, and it virtually always works. Star Citizen is the dream of the ultimate space sim. X4 is the one I can actually recommend as a functioning space empire sandbox. So is X4 Foundations the space sandbox to play in 2026? Honestly, if what you want is a simple answer, then no, because it depends what kind of space game you actually want. If you want relaxed discovery, No Man's Sky is easier to recommend. If you want pure flight feel, Elite Dangerous is stronger. If you want RPG questing, Starfield is the more obvious pick. If you want low-spec freedom and Star Trek modding, then Evochron is fantastic. If you want creative shipbuilding, Avorion has a strong case to be made. If you want a free classic economy sandbox, Helium Rain is worth trying. And if you want the impossible dream, Star Citizen is still out there promising the stars. But if you want a living space economy where your actions slowly turn into an empire, X4 is still in a class of its own. It's messy, demanding, occasionally awkward, and absolutely not the smoothest game to get into, though in fairness the tutorials are a lot better than they used to be. Very few games let you go from one small ship to a full industrial network, a fleet command structure, and a personal stake in the balance of power across the galaxy, and we should all rejoice in that. And with the Empire update bringing even more improvements, X4 still feels like a game that is slowly evolving in the direction that matters most. So for me, X4 remains one of the most interesting space games you can play in 2026 and beyond. This was a really fun video to make, and I really want your comments below because your opinion matters to me. This is where the LT gaming community becomes so important, and we want to read your opinions also. Are you an X4 fanatic, or are one of the other games that I compared it to your favourite? Like, comment and subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. I've been Luke from LT Gaming, and I'll see you out there amongst the stars.